Join me in prayer. God, as we share in this message, we ask that you would open our ears, open our hearts, our minds, our spirits. Speak to us once again. Renew us and send us back into the world, new people. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, over the last several weeks, we've been looking at this idea of why, this question, this universal question that we ask ourselves as people of faith. And it comes in many forms. It comes in the form of, why is there suffering in the world? And why do my prayers go unanswered? And why, God, what's your will for my life? Why am I not able to experience what your will is? And today, we end as we move into our defining story, as we begin to prepare to journey to the cross. It is a great way to end this ordinary time in our liturgical calendar, being reminded of that thing that we're going to be reminded of when we make our way all the way to the resurrection. And it is the Frederick Buechner saying that the worst thing truly is never the last thing. As we've been talking about the why question and suffering, we are reminded over and over and over again that God doesn't wish pain for people. God doesn't hoist upon the world tragedies. And yet somehow, in the midst of suffering, somehow good often comes from our pain. If you go and you look at our story of faith, you will see it is pretty clear that throughout our story of faith, that there are people who loved God with all of their heart, and despite the pain and suffering that happened in their lives, they held on tight to God. And so it wasn't that they didn't experience difficulties. It was that their faith helped sustain them and helped them remember the words that Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble, but I have overcome the world," Jesus said. And so our story of faith models for us when people are suffering, when people are struggling, when people are in pain, that in the midst of that, God remains faithful and is with us. So we're going to remember today these three things that help us ground in that Frederick Buechner saying the worst thing is never the last thing. We're going to remember that God is with us. The second thing that we're going to remember and talk about is that God works through you and me. And the last that we remember is that somehow in the midst of all the suffering, God finds a way so often to redeem suffering. So first, God walks with us. In a sense, we've been talking in confirmation about how we as United Methodists are non-creedal. It means we don't have one particular creed that we repeat or we say or we abide by each week, that we affirm our faith in so many ways. And in so many ways, this statement, God walks with us, is an affirmation of faith. No matter what we walk through in life, God walks with us, no matter how dark it gets. Over 165 times, someone said 365, that would be nice. It's not quite that, but over 165 times in our scriptures, it reminds us of this statement over and over again. What does God say to us? Do not be afraid. In our story of faith, often God is speaking these words to us. And then in the New Testament, Jesus is reminding us and pointing us to this constant reminder. No matter what is happening in your life, don't be afraid. Why? Because I am with you, God reminds us. This is an affirmation of faith. This is spoken all through the prophets. If you remember the prophet, Joshua says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And then, of course, in Isaiah, it says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." And then, of course, one of the Psalms that so many of us have memorized, "I will fear no evil, for thy art with me." You are with me. "Thy rod and thy staff," your rod and your staff, "they comfort me." Of course, the Psalm says, "When I am afraid," Psalm 56, "I put my trust in you." And then, of course, in the New Testament, as Jesus comes into the world, the Gospel of Matthew says, "His name shall be called Emmanuel," which means God with us. This is such an important part of our daily lives and our daily affirming our faith, believing that God is as close as the air we breathe. There really is something powerful in knowing that God is with us all of the time. God only doesn't promise to walk with us or be with us, God promises to work through us. So often when we think about how God works in the world when there is suffering, it's through us. If you remember the last few weeks, we've been looking at the movie Bruce Almighty, and we've been looking at some clips as Jim Carrey plays this roving reporter who wants to get this promotion. He's a bit narcissistic and full of himself. And so God says, "Fine, if you think you could do it better," he hands over all the power to him. And if you remember, he just makes a huge mess of everything. And in this one scene where he says he comes to God and says, "God, I've just made a mess of everything. I need you to fix it." God says, "Here's the thing. You people are always coming to me wanting me to fix everything, to fix all of your problems." God says, "You want me to do miracles? You want me to work miracles?" He says, "You are the miracle. Be the miracle." In other words, you have the power to make a difference. God's primary way of working in the world is not to suspend the laws of nature, but to work through you and me. I was thinking about the many ways in which we live by that here at Heart of Longmont. I was thinking of Tricia organizing the blood drives. It's so that those people, there are people out there living today, their lives have been saved because you chose to give blood. Today after church, as you prepare Chef Hardy, as you put together meal kits, healthy meal kits, there will be families gathering, eating a meal that will be special and healthy. I think shrimp and grits are healthy, isn't it? I mean, come on, close enough. I'm from the South, I'll call it healthy. But they'll be experiencing family time and an opportunity to be in relationship because you gathered and did that. I was thinking this week of our ministry where we have the blessing box filled with non-perishable food, but we also have a refrigerator filled with perishable food. And I had a person call me this week, and he and I were in a conversation, and he is disabled, he's blind, and he's trying to make his way with his family through the housing crisis we have here. His housing has been sold, his house is soon to be sold, and he and his family on a very fixed income are trying to find housing here in Longmont. As you know, it is impossible. And he said, "I don't have money. I'm doing my best to get us into this new house, and I don't have money for food." And I was able to offer our refrigerator of healthy food. Later, he called me and he said, "You know what I got out of that refrigerator? It was a miracle." You're the miracle. Be the miracle. This month for our compassion offering, if you're unaware of what we do each month, above and beyond our regular giving, we ask that you consider offering a compassion offering. And this month it's for UMCOR, United Methodist Committee on Relief. And this is an organization that is boots on the ground when there is chaos and disaster and suffering. So often we are known as the last ones to be there. When there's flood, when there's fire, when there's all kinds of tragedies. You know how God is doing that? You know how God is preparing those grounds to be healed and saved and cared for and rebuilt? Through you. You are the miracle. See, this is the idea that God's not going to just magically provide food or clothing. Through you, God changes our hearts. We become the miracle. That's one of the reasons I think it's so important for our young people to take mission trips each year, is to step out of their day-to-day lives and to experience something other than what they see on a normal day-to-day basis. So often young people, when they come back, they say, yeah, we went and we helped, but we were the one changed. They saw, they experienced, they learned in new and exciting ways. And through those ways that they are serving, they become new people. Do you know how our youth go and do that? Through you. You support them. We support them, giving them the opportunity. I want to tell you a story. I may have shared this before, but I'm a youth pastor at heart. I was a youth pastor for a very long time, and I was in youth ministry at my very first appointment at a very large United Methodist church, and we had the opportunity to take our youth to Puerto Rico one year. Well, that spring, I had a young woman who called me and left me a message and said, "Can I please come in and talk to you? I'm not part of your church, but I just need some support." And she stopped by. Her name is Gail, and she said, "I have this son, this teenage boy. He's reckless. He's impossible. He's making high-risk decisions. I'm worried about him. I'm wondering if there's a place for him here. Would you be willing to at least meet with him? His name is Brian." I said, "Sure, bring him in." Little did I know, later on I was going to birth 3 boys who were reckless, impossible. So Brian came in. He had just the day before been caught doing a flip off of his friend's roof onto the ground, fortunately not getting hurt, but everyone was worried about Brian. So Brian and I established a relationship, and I convinced him. He said, "I'm not coming to church. I don't do any of that stuff." I said, "But think about this mission trip. Just think about this trip." And I very hesitantly convinced, I think it convinced his parents who made him go. Brian came back from that trip. I wasn't able to go on the trip. I was pregnant with my son, Wynn, who was born in July, and this trip was the end of June. And I got a call from his mom, and she said, "Can you meet with Brian? Can you please meet with Brian?" I said, "Oh gosh, what did he do on the trip?" We sat around a table, and Brian had asked all the leadership to be there. Brian stood up and he said, "My life has been forever changed." He went on to say, "You know what I saw? I saw so much suffering, and I think I can make a difference in the world. I'm going to go on." Now remember, he's a junior in high school. "I'm going to go on to be a doctor. I'm going to serve the people of this world. I just know I am." Fast forward 4 years, Brian called and asked if 5 years, Brian called and asked if I would officiate his wedding. Fast forward 10 years, Brian is now serving in the Army as a surgeon. So see, Brian was changed. Be the miracle? He was the miracle. Just because of a youth mission trip that his parents made him go on, I'm sure of it. That's why Jesus said at the Last Judgment, I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, I was in prison, and you, not just the pastor, you visited me. And I was a stranger, my friends, and you welcomed me. See, we become the hands and the feet and the voice of Jesus when there is pain in the world. God is expecting us to respond. Be the miracle. You can be the miracle that someone else needs right now. Here's the last thing. God redeems suffering. God redeems suffering. God doesn't cause suffering, but so often something good comes of it. It's like the words of Martin Luther King where he talks about this rod of steel, that something so hard, and it's like God wrings it and bends it. God forces something good sometimes to come from pain. Redeems means to buy back, to take back. God takes back something that was painful, and somehow something beautiful comes. The last 2 years, we've been blessed here at Heart of Longmont to get to know Rachel Dwyier. Rachel's story is one where having a relationship with the church didn't seem possible. Didn't seem like she would ever find a church community where she would belong again. See, Rachel has been telling her story. Through that, I was introduced to Rachel from a mutual colleague of mine. It took Rachel a while to trust me when I said to her, "You will be welcome at my church." Because see, those words are often spoken and harm is still done. And yet somehow Rachel had the courage to step through our doors. See, Rachel is living her authentic self as a woman. Rachel has lived a life of pain, and somehow God has redeemed her suffering. And as she tells her story, she's changing the way that people understand what it means to be trans in our world. Rachel found a place here to call home. And being a part of our faith community has not only changed her, it has changed us. After the election this past November, Rachel, like many others in the trans community, found themselves immobilized in fear and pain. And once again, through her words, she offers us hope.
The day after I woke with a feeling of accomplishment. The day after I was unstoppable. The day after I had a sense of well-being. The day after becoming a Marine. The day after I woke, I was happy. The day after there was a song in my heart. The day after I was hopeful. The day after I felt alive. The day after my daughter was born. The day after I woke and I looked back and I felt I had done the right thing. The day after I look forward to a bright future. The day after I look forward to taking that step down a new path. The day after I retired from the Marines. The day after I awoke, I felt complete. The day after, I felt like me for the first time. The day after, I knew my life was bright. The day after, gender surgery. The day after I woke pain-free. The day after I was able to move without falling to the ground in pain. The day after my life was better. The day after back surgery. The day after I awoke, I felt a wholeness I had not felt since I was a child. The day after I knew I was among caring people. The day after I had a renewed hope for humanity. The day after joining this church, the Heart of Longmont. The day after I awoke to hate, I awoke to fear, I awoke to doubt, I awoke to loneliness and uncertainty. The day after I felt despair, hopelessness. The day after I felt betrayed, I felt angry. The day after elections. The day after is no longer safe for me. The day after leaves me alone. The day after I have lost faith in humanity. The day after I fear for our democracy, for our people's way of life. The day after I worry about the younger souls that do not have the experience of life and they feel they have no future. I fear they will pull that trigger. The day after is tomorrow. Tomorrow will I awake with a sense of comfort? Will tomorrow bring me happiness? Will tomorrow restore my faith in humanity? Will tomorrow allow me to be me again? When I awake tomorrow, will I awake from this nightmare? I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I hope tomorrow will bring me peace. I hope tomorrow will be more comforting than the day before. I hope tomorrow will be more accepting. I hope tomorrow will have less hate in the world. I hope tomorrow I will not have this heavy heart. I hope tomorrow I do not have to question my existence. Tomorrow, I hope. Can you as well?
Frederick Buechner, in his quote, "The worst thing is never the last thing," said the worst isn't the last thing about the world. It's next to the last thing. Because the last thing is the best. It's the power from on high that comes down into this world, that wells up from the rock bottom worst of the world like a hidden spring. Can you believe it? The last, the best thing is the laughing deep in the hearts of the saints, somewhere our hearts even. Yes, you are terribly loved and forgiven. Yes, you are healed. All is well. Do you have hope? Can you and will you be the miracle? See, as Jesus, he gathered those disciples around that table, and you'd think he would have no hope as he was about to lose his life. And he took bread, and he reminded them of the things that matter most. He said, we need God and we need each other. And he said, we are to be people of love. That's how they'll know of me. And he took bread and he broke it and he said, take the bread, eat it. It's a reminder of my body. It will be broken for you. And then he took a cup. It's a cup of suffering. And he said, drink of this cup often. It is a cup reminding you that you are my beloved, with whom I am well pleased, that you are forgiven. Drink of it often and remember. I invite you, as we are all invited to this powerful meal today, to come forward and receive your communion and to return to your seats for us to take communion together. In a moment, you're going to hear Ariel singing a song, and it is a reminder that God brings beauty from ashes and joy from mourning. God makes you beautiful. You are beautiful. You are invited now to come forward to partake in Holy Communion.